It was just after noon when a man in a worn jacket walked into the bank, holding a check for $10 million. The manager looked him up and down, then laughed, and asked where he stole that piece of paper. He said nothing. He reached for the check to move to another teller. She grabbed it first and tore it apart in front of everyone, still mocking him. Then a woman in expensive clothing entered. The manager rushed over to please her, until the woman saw the man and called him one word. "Sir." Why did one word change everything? Michael Harris stood outside the bank for a moment before going in. The building was tall and made of gray stone, with glass doors that reflected the street behind him. He wore a jacket that had seen too many winters and jeans that were clean but faded. His hands were rough from work, and his face carried the kind of tired calm that came from raising a child alone. He had left his daughter with a neighbor that morning because this errand could not wait. The check in his pocket was folded once. $10 million. It had arrived 3 days ago as the final payment for a software project he had built over 2 years. The client was a private equity firm that valued results more than appearances. Michael had worked nights after his daughter went to sleep, writing code in a cramped apartment with one desk and a laptop that overheated in the summer. The money was real. The work had been real. But he knew how he looked, and he knew what people saw when they looked at him. He pulled open the glass door and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of cleaning solution and paper. The lobby was wide with marble floors that made every footstep echo. There were 4 teller windows along the left wall and a row of chairs near the entrance where a few people sat waiting. A security guard stood near the door with his arms crossed. Michael walked toward the teller windows. He did not hurry. He had learned a long time ago that hurrying made people nervous. The woman behind the counter closest to him was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back tight and a blazer that looked expensive. Her nameplate read, Linda Parker, branch manager. She was sorting through a stack of papers and did not look up when he approached. Michael stopped in front of her window and waited. After a few seconds, she glanced up. Her eyes moved from his face to his jacket, to his hands, and back again. Her expression shifted. Not subtle. She did not try to hide it. Linda set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. She folded her arms across her chest and looked at him the way someone might look at a stain on the carpet. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the check. He unfolded it carefully and slid it across the counter toward her. He did not say anything. He had learned that too. Let the paper speak. Linda looked down at the check. Her eyes widened for half a second, then narrowed. She picked it up with 2 fingers, like it might be dirty, and held it up to the light. She turned it over, then back again. Then she laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was sharp and loud enough that the woman at the next window looked over. Michael stood still. He kept his face blank. Linda set the check down on the counter and tapped it with 1 finger. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Her voice was not curious. It was accusing. Michael met her eyes and said nothing. She leaned forward slightly and tilted her head. "I'm serious. Where did you steal this?" The word steal hung in the air between them. A man sitting in the waiting area looked up from his phone. The security guard shifted his weight. Michael felt the weight of their stares, but did not turn his head. "I didn't steal it," Michael said quietly. His voice was steady. Linda raised her eyebrows and made a sound that was halfway between a scoff and a laugh. She picked up the check again and waved it in the air like it was a joke someone had tried to play on her. "Right," she said. "A guy walks in here looking like he just came from a construction site with a check for $10 million. And I'm supposed to believe that's legit?" Michael took a slow breath. He had dealt with people like this before. People who decided what you were worth before you opened your mouth. He had no interest in arguing. He reached out his hand toward the check. "I'll go to another teller," he said. His tone did not change. It was calm, almost flat. Linda stared at him for a moment. then pulled the check back toward herself. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Her smile was thin and cold. "Not until I call security." Michael's hand stayed where it was. He did not raise his voice. He did not move closer. "I just want to deposit the check," he said. "That's all." Linda shook her head slowly, still holding the check between her fingers. "You think I'm stupid?" she asked. "You think I don't know a scam when I see one?" She looked past him toward the guard near the door and raised her voice slightly. "Excuse me, we might have a situation here." The guard straightened and started walking toward them. The other customers in the lobby were watching now. A woman with a small child stood up and moved farther away. Michael felt the shift in the room, the way people pulled back when they thought there might be trouble. He did not blame them. He had been on the other side of that instinct more times than he could count. He lowered his hand and stood very still. The guard stopped a few feet behind him. Linda looked pleased. "This man is trying to cash a fraudulent check," she said to the guard. She held it up so he could see it. The guard frowned and looked at Michael. Michael said nothing. He knew how this looked. He knew what the guard saw. A man in old clothes with calloused hands and no briefcase and no lawyer and no explanation that would make sense in 30 seconds or less. The guard did not move closer, but he did not leave either. He stayed where he was, watching. Linda turned her attention back to Michael. She was enjoying this now. He could see it in the way she held herself, the way her voice had changed. "You know what I think," she said. "I think you found this somewhere. Or maybe you printed it yourself. Either way, you're wasting my time." Michael looked at her and felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger, not even frustration, just a deep, familiar disappointment. He had hoped this would be simple. He should have known better. "Can I have the check back?" he asked. His voice was still calm. Linda tilted her head and smiled again. It was not a kind smile. "Why?" she asked. "So you can try this somewhere else?" She looked down at the check in her hand, then back at him. "I don't think so." Before Michael could respond, she gripped the check with both hands and tore it in half. The sound was sharp and final. She tore it again, and again. Pieces of paper fell onto the counter between them like snow. The room went quiet. The guard took a step closer, but did not speak. The woman with the child had already left. Another man near the chair stood up and walked toward the exit. Michael stared at the torn pieces of the check on the counter. His daughter's face flashed in his mind. The tutoring she needed. The medical bills he had been putting off. The future he had been trying to build with that money. All of it was there in those torn pieces of paper. He did not move. He did not shout. He stood there and looked at Linda Parker, and she looked back at him with something close to triumph in her eyes. She brushed the pieces of paper off the counter into a trash bin beside her desk. "Now get out of my bank," she said. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Before I have you arrested." The guard put a hand on Michael's shoulder. Not rough, just firm. A suggestion. Michael turned his head and looked at the guard. The man was older, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and a tired look in his eyes. He did not seem angry, just resigned. Michael nodded once and stepped back. The guard let go of his shoulder. Michael looked at Linda one more time. She was already turning back to her paperwork, dismissing him like he had never been there at all. He walked toward the door. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor. No one spoke. No one moved. He reached the glass doors and pushed one open. The sunlight outside was bright and warm. He stepped onto the sidewalk and let the door close behind him. He stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to calm the tightness in his chest. He had no idea how he was going to fix this. The check was gone. The company that sent it would have to reissue it, and that could take weeks. maybe longer. He had bills due in days. His daughter needed new shoes. The rent was coming up. He closed his eyes and let the sun hit his face. Then he heard the door open behind him. He did not turn around. He assumed it was the guard making sure he left, but the footsteps were different. Lighter. Quicker. He opened his eyes and turned his head. A woman stood a few feet away. She was in her mid-50s, dressed in a tailored gray suit with sharp lines, and no jewelry except a watch that looked like it cost more than his car. Her hair was silver and cut short. Her eyes were calm and direct. She looked at him the way a doctor might look at a patient, assessing, not judging. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was smooth and professional. Michael straightened and met her gaze. She took a step closer and glanced back at the bank, then at him again. "Were you just inside?" she asked. Michael nodded. "Yes," he said. The woman studied his face for a moment, then looked down at his jacket. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Did something happen in there?" she asked. Michael hesitated. He was not sure why she was asking. He was not sure he wanted to explain. "It's fine," he said quietly. The woman did not move. She kept looking at him, and he had the strange feeling that she already knew the answer. "What's your name?" she asked. Michael frowned slightly. "Michael Harris," he said. The woman's eyes widened just a fraction. Then she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that came before something important. "Mr. Harris," she said, "I think you and I need to go back inside." Michael looked at the woman standing in front of him and tried to understand what was happening. She had said his name like she knew him, but he had never seen her before. Her suit was perfectly pressed, and her posture was the kind that came from years of sitting in boardrooms where every word mattered. She gestured toward the bank entrance with one hand, waiting for his response. He did not move right away. He had just been humiliated in there, and the idea of walking back inside made his chest tighten. "I don't think that's a good idea," Michael said quietly. The woman looked at him with calm, steady eyes. She did not seem surprised by his hesitation. "Mr. Harris," she said, "I'm Victoria Reynolds. I'm the regional director for this branch and 4 others in the state." She let that sit for a moment, then continued. "I was on my way here for a scheduled inspection when I saw you leaving. I know who you are because your name crossed my desk 2 weeks ago in connection with a major contract. So yes, I think we should go back inside." Michael felt something shift in his chest. Not relief exactly. More like the first crack in a wall he had been holding up for too long. He looked past her toward the glass doors. Through them, he could see Linda Parker still at her counter, talking to another customer now, like nothing had happened. The security guard had returned to his post near the entrance. Everything looked normal. Calm, like the last 10 minutes had been erased. Victoria stepped closer and lowered her voice slightly. "What happened in there?" she asked. Michael met her eyes and saw no judgment, just a direct question that expected a direct answer. He told her, not all of it, just the essentials, the check, the accusation, the tearing, the dismissal. He kept his voice even and his words simple. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, her expression had not changed, but something in her jaw had tightened. "Come with me," she said. It was not a request. She turned and walked back toward the entrance. Michael followed. He was not sure why. Maybe because she had used his name like it meant something. Maybe because she had listened. Maybe because he was tired of being dismissed. The glass door swung open, and they stepped back into the cool air of the lobby. The security guard looked up and recognized Victoria immediately. He straightened and nodded. She nodded back but did not stop walking. Linda Parker was still at her counter. She had her back turned, filing something in a drawer behind her. Victoria walked directly toward her, with Michael a step behind. The other tellers noticed first. A young man at the far window glanced over, saw Victoria, and his face went pale. He looked away quickly. The woman at the counter next to Linda looked up and froze mid-sentence with a customer. Linda must have sensed the change in the room because she turned around. Her eyes landed on Victoria first, and her entire posture shifted. She smiled, bright and professional. "Ms. Reynolds," Linda said warmly, "I didn't know you were coming in today." She stepped forward and extended her hand. Victoria did not take it. She stopped a few feet from the counter and looked at Linda with the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavy. Linda's hand hovered in the air for a second before she lowered it. Her smile faltered, but did not disappear. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Her tone was still light, but there was a thin edge of uncertainty beneath it. Victoria tilted her head slightly and glanced at Michael, who stood just behind her. Linda's eyes followed the gesture. When she saw Michael, her face went rigid. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked back at Victoria, then at Michael again, like she was trying to piece together a puzzle she did not want to solve. Victoria let the silence stretch for a moment longer, then spoke. "Ms. Parker," she said, "this is Michael Harris. I believe you two have already met." Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Michael again, and this time her eyes were different. Not defiant, not dismissive, something closer to panic. She shook her head slightly and tried to smile again, but it came out wrong. Crooked. Yes, she said. He was just here. There was a misunderstanding." Victoria did not blink. "A misunderstanding," she repeated. Her voice was flat. Linda nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Yes. He had a check that seemed unusual. I was just being cautious. You know how it is. We have to be careful." Victoria crossed her arms. The movement was slow and deliberate. "Careful," she said. "Is that what you call it?" Linda's smile disappeared entirely. She glanced around the lobby. The other customers were watching now. The young teller at the far window had stopped what he was doing. The security guard stood near the door, looking uncomfortable. Linda's hands moved to the edge of the counter, gripping it tightly. "Ms. Reynolds, I can explain," she said. Her voice was quieter now, almost pleading. Victoria took one step closer to the counter. "Mr. Harris came in with a legitimate check for $10 million, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. Every word was clear and deliberate. A check issued by Greystone Capital as payment for a software development project that took 2 years to complete. A project that I personally reviewed and approved as part of our partnership program. And you accused him of theft." Linda's face went white. She shook her head. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "I had no way of knowing." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You had the check in your hands," she said. "You could have called Greystone to verify it. You could have asked him for identification. You could have treated him with the basic respect we extend to every person who walks through that door. Instead, you decided he was a criminal based on what? His clothes?" Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at Michael, and for the first time, he saw something close to fear in her eyes. Michael stood very still. He had imagined this moment on the walk back inside. He had thought he might feel satisfaction, vindication, but all he felt was tired. Victoria turned slightly and gestured toward Michael. "Mr. Harris is not just a client," she said. "He is one of the developers behind the security software we've been integrating into our entire network. His work is protecting millions of dollars in assets across this region. And you tore up his check and threw him out like he was trash." The words landed like stones. Linda's hands were shaking now. She looked down at the counter, then back up at Victoria. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean. I was just trying to protect the bank." Victoria's expression did not soften. "Protect the bank," she said. By humiliating a client in front of a room full of people? By destroying his property without cause? By calling security on a man who did nothing wrong? She let the questions hang in the air. Linda had no answers. Victoria turned to the security guard, who had moved closer during the exchange. "Did you witness what happened here earlier?" she asked. The guard hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said. His voice was rough and low. "I was called over. Ms. Parker said the gentleman had a fraudulent check. I stayed nearby in case there was trouble." Victoria looked at him steadily. "Did Mr. Harris cause any trouble?" she asked. The guard shook his head. "No, ma'am. He was calm the whole time. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't move toward anyone." Victoria nodded and turned back to Linda. "So you called security on a calm, polite client who was trying to conduct a legitimate transaction," she said. "And then you destroyed his property." Linda's breathing was shallow now. She looked around the room as if searching for support, but no one met her eyes. The other tellers had gone back to pretending they were busy. The customers kept their distance. She was alone. "Ms. Reynolds, please," Linda said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I made a mistake. I'll apologize. I'll fix it." Victoria shook her head slowly. "You can't fix this," she said. "That check is gone. Mr. Harris will have to request a reissue from Greystone, which will take time. Time he shouldn't have to waste, because you decided to play judge and jury." She took a breath, and her voice dropped lower. "But that's not even the worst part." Linda looked at her with wide eyes. Victoria continued. "The worst part is that you did this in front of other customers. You made a spectacle of it. You wanted everyone to see you put him in his place. That tells me this isn't about protecting the bank. It's about power. And people like you don't belong in a position where you have power over others." Linda's face crumpled. She pressed her hands flat on the counter and leaned forward slightly, like she might collapse. "Please don't do this," she said. "I have bills. I have a family. I need this job." Victoria's expression did not change. "You should have thought about that before you tore up a $10 million check," she said. She turned to the young teller at the far window. "Mr. Brennan," she called. The young man jumped slightly and looked over. "Yes, Ms. Reynolds," he said. His voice shook a little. "Please call HR and inform them that Ms. Parker's employment is terminated effective immediately," Victoria said. The words were clean and final. The young teller's eyes went wide. He looked at Linda, then back at Victoria. "Right now?" he asked. "Right now," Victoria confirmed. Mr. Brennan picked up the phone with trembling hands and started dialing. Linda made a sound that was halfway between a gasp and a sob. She looked at Victoria with desperate eyes. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't just fire me on the spot." Victoria met her gaze without flinching. "I absolutely can," she said. "And I am. You violated our code of conduct. You damaged client property. You created a hostile environment. Any one of those would be grounds for termination. You managed all three in under 10 minutes." Linda's hands dropped to her sides. She looked at Michael, and for a moment, he thought she might say something to him. An apology, an excuse, anything. But she just stared at him with red-rimmed eyes, and he saw in her face the full weight of what she had done. Not because she understood it, but because it had consequences now. Consequences she could not avoid. She turned back to Victoria. "I'm sorry," she said again. It sounded hollow. Victoria did not respond. She simply waited. The young teller hung up the phone and looked over. "HR is sending someone down," he said quietly. Victoria nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan," she said. She looked at Linda one more time. "You can wait in the break room until they arrive," she said. "Leave your keys and your badge on the counter." Linda's hands moved slowly to her pocket. She pulled out a set of keys and a plastic badge with her name and photo on it. She set them on the counter with shaking fingers. Then she turned and walked toward the back of the bank. Her footsteps were soft and uneven. She did not look at anyone. When she was gone, the lobby felt different. Lighter. The tension that had filled the room began to dissolve. The customers who had been watching turned back to their own business. The tellers returned to their screens. The security guard let out a long breath and stepped back toward his post. Michael stood where he was, trying to process what had just happened. Victoria turned to him. Her face softened slightly. Not much, just enough to show that the steel in her voice had been for Linda, not for him. "Mr. Harris," she said, "I apologize on behalf of this institution. What happened here was unacceptable." Michael nodded, but did not speak. He was not sure what to say. Victoria gestured toward the hallway that led deeper into the bank. "Please come with me," she said. "We'll handle your transaction properly, and I'll personally contact Greystone to expedite the reissue of your check." She started walking, and Michael followed. They passed the row of teller windows and turned down a hallway lined with offices. At the end was a door with a placard that read, "VIP Services." Victoria opened the door and held it for him. Inside was a small room with a round table, 2 chairs, and a window that overlooked the street. The walls were painted a soft gray, and there was a faint scent of lavender in the air. It was quiet, calm, the opposite of everything that had just happened. Victoria gestured to one of the chairs. "Please, sit," she said. Michael sat. His legs felt heavy. Victoria took the chair across from him and folded her hands on the table. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. "I want you to know," she said finally, "that what Ms. Parker did does not reflect the values of this bank. We serve everyone, regardless of how they look or where they come from." Michael nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet. Victoria leaned back slightly. "How long will it take to get the check reissued?" he asked. She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'll call Greystone as soon as we're finished here," she said. "Given the circumstances, I expect they'll expedite it. You should have a new check within 3 to 5 business days." Michael felt some of the weight lift from his chest. Not all of it, but enough. "I appreciate that," he said. Victoria set her phone down and looked at him with something close to curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Michael nodded. "Why didn't you fight back?" she asked. "When she tore up the check, when she called you a thief, you just stood there. Why?" Michael thought about that for a moment. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work that had nothing to do with code. Then he looked back at her. "Because fighting back wouldn't have changed her mind," he said. "It would have just made things worse. People like that, they've already decided who you are before you open your mouth. The only thing fighting does is prove them right." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You're probably right," she said. "But it shouldn't be that way." Michael almost smiled. "No," he said. "It shouldn't." They sat in silence for a few seconds, and for the first time since he walked into the bank that afternoon, Michael felt like he could breathe. Victoria picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. She held it to her ear and looked at Michael across the table while she waited. After 3 rings, someone answered. "This is Victoria Reynolds," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. "I need to speak with David Marsh in accounts payable." "Yes, I'll hold." She lowered the phone slightly and looked at Michael. "This will just take a minute," she said. Michael nodded. He felt strange sitting in this quiet room after everything that had happened, like he had stepped from one world into another. The line clicked, and Victoria raised the phone again. "David, it's Victoria. I'm calling about a check issued to Michael Harris 2 weeks ago. Check number 84739. "Yes, that's the one. It was damaged and needs to be reissued immediately. She listened for a moment, then her eyes sharpened. No, I don't want it mailed. I want it couriered directly to our downtown branch by end of business tomorrow. This is a priority client, and we need to make this right. Another brief silence. Good. Thank you, David. She ended the call and set the phone down on the table. You'll have a new check by tomorrow afternoon, she said. I'll call you personally when it arrives, and you can pick it up here or at any branch you prefer. Michael felt the tightness in his chest loosen a little more. He had been preparing himself for a long wait, maybe weeks of back and forth calls and paperwork. This was faster than he had expected. Thank you, he said. Victoria waved a hand slightly, dismissing the gratitude. It's the least we can do, she said. She leaned forward and rested her arms on the table. I want to be very clear about something, Mr. Harris, she said. What happened today is not acceptable. Not at this bank, not at any bank. We have policies in place specifically to prevent this kind of treatment, and Ms. Parker violated every single one of them. Michael looked at her and saw something in her face that reminded him of his daughter's teacher. The same kind of seriousness that came from caring about something more than just the rules. I believe you, Michael said quietly. Victoria nodded. Good, she said, because I need you to know that people will be held accountable, not just Ms. Parker. I'm going to review our training protocols and our hiring practices. If there are gaps, we'll fix them. If there are other employees who think it's acceptable to treat people the way you were treated, they won't be here much longer. She spoke like someone who had already made a list in her head and was working through it step by step. Michael thought about Linda Parker sitting in the break room right now, waiting for HR to arrive. He thought about the look on her face when Victoria told her she was fired. He did not feel good about it. He did not feel bad either. It was just a fact now, like the weather. She said she had a family, Michael said. Victoria's expression did not change. So do you, she replied. And she didn't care about that when she humiliated you in front of a room full of people. The words hung in the air between them. Michael nodded slowly. Victoria was right. He had spent so much of his life trying not to make waves, trying to be invisible, that he sometimes forgot he had the right to expect better. He looked out the window at the street beyond. People were walking past with coffee cups and shopping bags, going about their lives like nothing had happened. And for them, nothing had. But for him, something had shifted. He was not sure what it was yet, but he could feel it. Victoria stood up and smoothed the front of her suit. I'd like to walk you out, she said, if that's all right. Michael stood as well. You don't have to do that, he said. She smiled slightly. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. I know, she said, but I want to make sure everyone in this building sees you being treated the way you should have been treated from the start. She opened the door and gestured for him to go first. Michael stepped out into the hallway. They walked back toward the lobby together. The tellers glanced up as they passed, and Michael noticed the way their eyes followed Victoria. Not with fear exactly, but with respect. She carried authority the way some people carried umbrellas, like it was just part of who she was. When they reached the main floor, the security guard straightened again. Victoria stopped near the entrance and turned to Michael. Do you have everything you need? She asked. Michael nodded. Yes, he said. Thank you again. Victoria extended her hand, and Michael shook it. Her grip was firm and brief. I'll call you tomorrow when the check arrives, she said. And if you have any other issues, any at all, you call me directly. I'll make sure you have my number before you leave. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and handed it to him. Michael took it and slipped it into his own pocket. The card felt heavier than it should have, like it carried weight beyond the paper. He turned toward the glass doors, and Victoria walked with him. When they reached the exit, she held the door open for him. Michael stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. The air was warm, and the street smelled like exhaust and hot pavement. He turned back to look at her. She stood in the doorway, framed by the glass and the marble behind her. "Mr. Harris," she said. He stopped. "Yes?" She looked at him with those calm, steady eyes. "Don't let people like Linda Parker make you think you don't belong somewhere. You earned that check. You earned respect. Don't forget that." Michael felt something tighten in his throat. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. Victoria nodded back, then stepped inside and let the door close. Michael stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching her walk back across the lobby. Then he turned and started walking toward his car. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from his neighbor asking how things went. He typed back quickly, "All good. Be home soon." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. The neighborhood where he lived was 20 minutes away. Small houses with chain-link fences and cars parked on the street. When he pulled up in front of his building, his daughter was sitting on the front steps waiting for him. She was 8 years old with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and a backpack covered in stickers. She jumped up when she saw him and ran over. "Dad!" she called. Michael got out of the car and crouched down so she could throw her arms around his neck. He held her tight for a moment, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. "How was your day?" she asked when she pulled back. Michael stood and ruffled her hair. "It was interesting," he said. She tilted her head. "Good interesting, or bad interesting?" He thought about that. "Both," he said. "But it ended good." She seemed satisfied with that answer and grabbed his hand. "Mrs. Callahan made cookies," she said. "She said I could have 2, but I only ate 1 because I wanted to save 1 for you." Michael felt his chest tighten again. But this time it was different. Warmer. They walked inside together. The apartment was small and cluttered with books and toys, and the remnants of a life built on a tight budget. But it was theirs. Michael set his keys on the counter and looked around. In a few days, the new check would arrive. He would deposit it without incident. He would pay off the medical bills and the tutoring costs and the rent. He would buy his daughter new shoes and maybe take her somewhere she had been asking to go. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered, as much as the fact that she had saved him a cookie. She pulled it out of a napkin and handed it to him. It was chocolate chip, slightly crumbled. He took a bite and smiled. "Best cookie I've had all day," he said. She grinned and sat down at the small table in the corner, pulling out her homework. Michael leaned against the counter and watched her for a moment. He thought about Linda Parker and the way she had looked at him. He thought about Victoria Reynolds and the way she had said his name. He thought about the security guard and the other customers, and the way the whole room had shifted when the truth came out. And he realized something. He had spent so long trying to make himself small, trying not to be seen, that he had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Not because he had money now, not because someone important had acknowledged him, but because he had walked into that bank knowing his worth, and he had walked out the same way. Everything in between had just been noise. He finished the cookie and sat down across from his daughter. She looked up at him and smiled. "What?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nothing," he said. "Just glad to be home." The next afternoon, Victoria called. The check had arrived. Michael drove back to the bank, and this time when he walked in, a different teller greeted him with a smile. The transaction took less than 10 minutes. No questions, no accusations, just professional courtesy and a receipt printed on clean white paper. When he left, he did not look back. He had no reason to. The bank was just a building. The check was just money. What mattered was what he did with it. And he already knew. He picked up his daughter from school that day and told her they were going to the bookstore. She asked why, and he said, because she deserved new books, and he deserved to buy them for her. They spent an hour wandering the aisles, and she picked out 3 novels about dragons and magic. He paid for them without checking the price. On the way home, she held the bag in her lap and kept peeking inside like the books might disappear. Michael drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the window frame, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, something quieter, something that felt like peace. Weeks later, he got an email from Victoria Reynolds. It was brief and professional. She wanted to let him know that the bank had implemented new training for all branch managers on customer service and bias awareness. She thanked him for his patience and said she hoped he would continue to do business with them. Michael read the email twice, then replied with 2 words: "Thank you." He did not need to say more. She would understand. And if she did not, that was fine too. He had said what mattered. The lesson he carried from that day was simple. Respect is not something you earn by proving yourself to people who have already decided you are not worth their time. Respect is something you give, because every person who walks through a door, any door, deserves it. And if someone cannot see that, the problem is not with the person walking in. It is with the person standing behind the counter. Michael Harris knew that now, and he would make sure his daughter knew it too.